This is Teaching to the Test Pattern.
Hey buddy, welcome to Teaching to the Test Pattern. I'm Tom White, your host, and today, very special episode. It's got to be like 6 months or a year into the making. Getting this guy to not be on a baseball or football field somewhere. He is the video teacher at Harrison High School by way of Seneca, New York.
West Seneca.
West Seneca.
There's a difference there.
And you went to West Seneca East High School?
West Seneca East Senior High School. Go Trojans.
Which we'll have to figure out the whole how is it West and East at the same time.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
He owns Phelps Production and literally probably shoots more content than most 3- and 4-letter networks. It's the one, the only Bill Phelps.
Hey, how you doing, Tom? Thanks very much for having me. And yeah, it's been a lot longer than 3 to 6 months. We've been talking about this since you started your podcast. Like, hey, this would be kind of cool to have you on.
Well, I couldn't get you. It seems like you're in Hoover, Alabama every weekend.
It does seem that way. It does seem that I can go into the hotel. They all know me by name. They usually give you my usual room and what have you. So it's a nice, comfortable feel. It's a good home base.
And I really like the stadium there for the football team, Tom White Stadium, or Tom White Field for
Yep.
Hoover. They didn't name it after me, I don't think.
No, that's the Hoover Metropolitan Complex. That stadium right there that they transfer over to a football field for the fall is actually where they play the SEC Super Regionals for baseball.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, it's Tom White Field, and I'll take pride in that.
Very good.
All right, so Bill joins me today, and again, we've been working on this for a while, trying to get he and I on the same page. And talk about what you do. I mean, you're the video teacher at Harrison High School. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into Phelps Productions a little bit.
Sure. Well, I've been at Harrison High School since November 1st, 2011. And when I walked into that classroom within the first 2 days, I think I finally figured out what I want to be when I grow up, and this is it. Just don't ask me to grow up. That won't happen. I thank my principal every day because I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. It was a kind of a long, windy road to get there, but I used to sell to the industry. I used to sell storage devices and storage subsystems to the film industry. That's how I got introduced to this whole business. So I would call on all the studios and post houses out in Hollywood and in New York and all the major players out there, and that's who I dealt with, both for audio and with video. And love what I did. That was all while I was up in Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. I had to get in that. And when we moved down here, didn't have a job, so I kind of set up Phelps Productions, did a lot of filming for church and weddings and oddball stuff like that. Still connected with my people out on the West Coast and send them video, and they would tear it all apart and tell me how to do it right. And so I was doing that. Then I started a sub for the video teacher at Cal High School back when he was there, and started getting more and more sub jobs. And finally, the sub coordinator just said, you just ought to teach, and you're good with the kids, love what you do, and you should just teach. So I did. I got into the teaching business, taught special ed, middle school science, and I got a break. It was a courtesy interview with Harrison High School. The principal at Cal taught with Mr. Griggers at the time, the principal at Harrison, and so he says, okay, send him on in. And I brought everything that I did with the kids over at Cal. And 2.5 hours later, he said that was fun. And the next day I got the offer for the job. So I left mid-semester from teaching middle school special ed science to teaching broadcast video production.
I didn't realize that you and I started literally within weeks of each other.
Really?
Because I started mid-October of 2011.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
All right. Well, you got a head start. So, yeah, no wonder you're so much better than I am.
Oh, listen, bro. I don't know that it was a head start. I had kids who had not had a teacher for 4 months.
I was the fourth sub. I was the fourth teacher they had since August.
Well, they had not had they'd had a sub, and I made the joke that my first month there was just peeling them off the ceiling. I mean, they were wild.
Yeah.
And I had my first parent conference my second day teaching.
There you go.
Yeah, that was interesting. So Phelps Productions, it's kind of morphed a little bit, and you do some different things. Talk about what you do with that, and how you really kind of give students opportunities to get out and really learn some practical stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Phelps Productions when I first moved down here. My wife and I, we moved down in 2004, and we didn't have a job, and we quit our jobs up north, moved down here. My oldest was just starting Georgia Tech. Youngest was just starting high school, so their guys going to change buildings anyway. Let's go. And so I arrived. I needed some money, cash flow, so I started Phelps Productions so I can go out and do gigs. And as I started getting more and more into larger size gigs, I would go to Cal High School saying, hey, who's your best video students? Who do you have? And so they would put me in touch with a few of their best, and I started hiring them. And that's how it all started. And so when I got to teaching, I was still filming for all the sports at Cal High School at the time, and would hire my best students and say, guys, you're learning skills now. You don't have to do this as a career. This is gas money. This is your insurance payment. This is your registration fees. This is free money here, and it's not hard. Yeah. Just learn the skills that you have. People will pay you to do a good job. And it's not hard to do that. And so that's how I started. And I've been doing that ever since to this day. My business model has changed. I've gone from doing weddings and a lot of corporate and legal video to now more and more sports as I go. So now I'm almost exclusively with Skill Show, which is out of Seattle, Washington. And they're partnered with Perfect Games, Elite 11, Gatorade, Nike, all those. So whenever they have anything down in the Southeast and in my area, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North, South Carolina, say, hey, Phelps, I need a crew of 7 and go. And so I search out, find my best students from around typically I start with mine and then I go to the county and head on out and go from there.
Yeah, it's really cool to see, you post on social media, hey, it's another beautiful Sunday morning and there's a young man or young woman in the shot, and you can tell they're locked in. And the great part is I love that they make them wear the vests. They do all of the stuff that if this child or student goes to the next level, they can expect. And that's a beautiful thing. Let's talk about your program at Harrison.
Sure.
You and I have been walking around here for the last hour sharing stories, and one of the things that I didn't realize is how many different products you put out of Harrison. I've seen the sports stuff, I've seen the Hoya Vision, but I didn't realize that you had the Friday show, and I didn't realize all of those things. So let's talk about the shows that you guys are doing there at Harrison. Okay,
well, we do 2 live stream shows a week. On Wednesdays is our sports. It's done during our advisement, which is between first and second. So we got a whopping 8 minutes. But the good thing about that is that it teaches the kids, there's a hard start and a hard stop. we have 8 minutes to fill and exactly 8 minutes to fill. So on Wednesdays, we do our HSPN show, which is all things Harrison sports. And I kind of model it after the WSB's Georgia Game Day show, where it's all things Georgia UGA sports. And that's my model. That's my guide that I want the students to kind of replicate and do. And then on Fridays, we have our magazine-style show, again, during our advisement, 8 minutes. And same concept. It's more of a magazine style, so kind of like people to people. And one of the things my principal made very clear when she came in, she just said, listen, I want no controversy. Everything's, I'm not like, you know what? That's what people to people is. We can celebrate our 2,300 Harrison students in the community around there. There's enough people and things to celebrate. So let's go tell those stories.
And that's a beautiful thing because you and I were talking before about how when I meet one of the college students, within 5 minutes can tell if they've had any experience actually producing shows. Mm-hmm. and an opportunity like you offer with not only doing the shows but doing them live mm-hmm. is very, very important for those kids as they go to the next level. Let's talk about goals. One of the things that with a program like yours mm-hmm. where you're aggressive, you've got all these things going on, what's the overarching goal for your program?
I've kind of distilled it down to a very simple one, which is difficult to execute. But essentially, I want to become a mini Cox Media. Cox Media owns WSB Channel 2 here in Atlanta. And so we have a broadcast, much like they do, as I was saying, with their people-to-people show that's done on the weekends, all feel-good stories about the community. So we have our Hoya Vision. We have our HSPN, which is very similar to their UGA Game Day. They also have a lot of radio shows, so I've started to incorporate podcasts. So we have what I'm initially starting as a bi-weekly, but we've got a couple people on there that like to do more culture-based stuff. So we have it's done weekly, and it's called Hoya Vision Today in 10. And so it's a 10, 12-minute podcast where we take some of the stories and we go a little deeper dive into it. And we have conversations about it, so it's more than 60, 90 seconds. And lastly, Cox Media owns AJC Computer or AJC Newspaper, and so we actually have an online news presence, which I haven't really been promoting because we got to get a regular source of input on there. And just recently I started partnered with patch.com, which provides a free website where students can write. It's all written journalism with pictures and so forth, put on by a hyper-local, national-based newspaper, essentially.
And, we were talking earlier about, the different opportunities that come out of a broadcast program. And the reading and writing piece is something that just cannot be ignored. And, it may be completely egotistical and self-centered that we think that when it comes to, if you want to improve test scores at your school, improve your broadcast and your journalism programs.
Absolutely.
And you're attacking that on several different fronts, which is a great thing. Let's get into the classroom. What's the best lesson you've ever taught?
Holy cow. I was thinking about that as I was driving up here. I think the best lesson that I've ever taught, that even my alumni students, when they come on back, they still talk about it. I just got done implementing it with my level 1 kids as we start our broadcast unit for the last part of the semester, is my house of cards, my infamous house of cards.
Yes.
One of the things, I got that from my organizational psychology class way back when I was in college. And essentially what it is I build a 12-card, single-level house of cards in my office, and I hide it. I just cover it up. And I give the producers and directors, we have 2 crews, so we've selected our producers and directors, and I give them this exact same cards. And their mission is to replicate my house of cards. But there's rules attached to this. So the producers and directors can only talk to each other in my office. They cannot take a picture of the house of cards. They can sketch it, but they can't take a picture. Once they leave my office, the producer is no longer allowed to talk. Once they leave my office and the deck of cards, their cards for each of their teams gets put on the table, the director is no longer allowed to touch the cards. The director is the only one allowed to speak to the students. So they have to learn how to communicate and instruct the students how to replicate that house of cards to the directors. The producers kind of sit back, and if they notice something, like, oh, okay, I see where we're going here, I think this is a better way, they tap their director, they come on back into my office, and they say, hey, try this, and then they go back out again. And so they learn how to communicate, how to problem solve, how to work together as a team in order to replicate that house of cards. And it's real life no matter where you go. That, to me, on a broadcast, on a live broadcast, guess what? The director can't go and operate all the cameras, soundboard, teleprompter, and so forth. They can't be the TD in some cases. So they have to learn how to communicate and direct a show without actually touching the things, how to do that through other people, how to solve problems, how to attack different things as the cards fall down. How do you redo it so that it stands up? Similar to what we do. So I think that's probably the closest thing that I've come up to, and then people still talk about that.
Oh yeah, and we did that several years ago at Camp T&I,
Yep.
And it was great to watch educators who all have some form of experience in the field struggle with that task. That was a lot of fun.
Yep.
It's interesting too. There are 2 lessons that come to mind for me, and one is card-based. Mm-hmm. I went online and I was like, one of the things that people don't understand about what we do is they don't understand what we do. It's magic to them. They don't understand how we shoot the right angles and tell the right story and evoke emotion. Went online and found a self-working card trick. And that was how I would start every semester, with blank deck of cards,
okay,
or just a deck of cards, still in the foil, still in the wrapper.
Right.
I'd hand it to a kid. I go, hey, make sure these are right. Take the jokers and the
instructions
out. And then there's a card trick, and I'll post it in the comments or in the description for this. But there's a card trick that you can do, and it works every time, as long as you do it right. And I show the kids, I'm like, hey, as long as you follow the process, it works every time. Mm-hmm. And I literally have kids now who go, hey, I showed that to my girlfriend and she was amazed. And I said, yeah, I said, it's the holiday season. Take it home.
Yeah.
Bet your crazy uncle. Hey, I'll bet you $5. I can tell you, Yeah. And I literally, a buddy of mine is a math, like, as much as we are about video, he is about math. And I was like, I need you to help me figure out how this works. He couldn't. It was it's something about the number 27, and he's like, I can't figure it out.
It just does.
It just works.
Yep.
It's interesting that those are both, based off playing cards. Yeah.
Yep.
So now at my house I have like 47 decks of playing cards. If you ever want to run a poker tournament. When it comes to your day to day, what's a day for Bill Phelps?
My first block, we're in blocks, so I got 4 blocks. I'm extended day, so I teach all 4 blocks, which is why I look as old as I do.
You don't look bad for 97.
Yeah. See, no one would ever know that. So my first period is my broadcast class, which is pretty much self-run. I mean, my kids do all the work. It is a truly student-run broadcast. And it's amazing to watch it morph over the semester. I mean, now everybody takes it serious. Everybody's got their jobs to do. They got their stories to do. And they're high school kids. The producers and directors are taking the responsibility. They're making sure everything's up and running, and it's getting smoother and smoother. And they're starting to branch out more and more. Every few weeks, I say, okay, we got this down. I want you to try adding this element to it and see what you can do. Figure that out. And I literally say, figure that out. So all the cool stuff you were showing me on the new tech TriCaster, my kids do that on their own.
It's great.
They play with everything. Just like play, guys, play.
Yep.
That's how you figure it out, and then just replicate it and then write it down so I can solve a problem for next semester. But
that's exactly how I do it too. I just play.
Yep. That's the name of the game. You got to be able to play, and that's probably the best part of our educational experience is they get to play and they learn by playing, as opposed to have to memorize or have to do all those kinds of things in the standard academic class. Here, they learn through experience, which is awesome. Which
I'm going to shamelessly plug a forthcoming podcast episode about whether you're a teacher or a trainer and the difference between the two. But we'll save that for next week when that releases. So when a kid comes through your class, when they spend their 2, 3, 4 years or one semester, what is the one thing you want them to take away?
Well, it's one thing, but it's made up of 5 parts.
Okay.
It's my 5 R's. That is my rules. I've been using those 5 R's since I've managed CVS pharmacies, since I've managed international sales forces, since I've managed anything, any retail. I've used these same 5 R's wherever I go. And I tell my students, if you know these 5 R's, you'll be okay wherever you go. And that's very simple. Be in the right place at the right time with the right materials, ready to work with respect for yourself and others. They get it all, except they get confused about the self-respect thing. And so I usually spend time going around with them. What does that mean to you? And essentially, I boil it down to don't let your name be associated with anything less than your best. Don't have to be perfect. You just got to do your best. Because in this world, it's not what you know. They all say, oh, yeah, it's who you know. I'm like, it's not even that. It's who knows you, and you have no idea who knows you. All the filming I do with Skill Show, and I see this college recruits and the professional scouts, kids don't know that they're on from the time they walk in the park. And I've watched names get crossed off lists. They don't even know that they're being crossed off. So I said, it's high school, guys. You're on. Who does your references? Teachers. Mm-hmm. Show your best self, because we're the ones that are going to say yay or nay to writing you a reference or a recommendation for a college or a job. We're your ticket.
I told one of my assistants when I was in radio, I said, in radio always there was a shakeup, and she was someone else's assistant and became mine. And, I was given the option, do you want? I was like, well, yeah. And I told her later, I said, you'd been on a job interview for 7 months. You didn't know it, but we could have done a national search and brought somebody else in, but you had been on a job, you knew the job. And that's how I ended up here. Yep. I mean, I had been on a job interview for 7 years and ended up here at UGA based off of, what we had done. And that is something that I wish it was easier to teach kids. I wish it was easier to go, hey, you got to understand that everything you do is being watched. And I had a conversation with one of my former students yesterday, and I told him, once you're my kid, you're my kid.
Yep.
He was freaked out because he got in trouble yesterday, and I texted him, and he's like, how did you know? And I'm like, you're my kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've moved on, but you're still my kid.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing. I like the 5 R's, and it's always interesting when I ask teachers, what their rules are, and it's then interesting to ask the students what the rules are.
Right.
Marketing teacher at Morgan County, Katie Harris, she had 4 rules, and you could go in her classroom and a kid would go, hey, that's rule 2.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
You can ask any of my students the 5 R's, and they should be able to come. They'll know what you're talking about, and it may be a little out of order, but that's the key. So that's the one thing I grill into them, because it'll help them no matter where they go.
So you've been teaching 11 years. What is something you would tell a teacher starting to teach in 2023?
I would tell them what I learned actually when I was a special ed teacher. Get to know your students. Every student has a backstory. Every student has a story. That kid that's falling asleep on your desk, there's a reason why for that. Now, I'm not saying they're all above board and all that kind of fun stuff, but I have learned not to take anything at face value. You've got to get to know the students and their background. The better job you do with that, the better rapport you're going to have, and the better outcome that they're going to have.
Gotcha. This curveball, it hit me just a moment ago, and you're engaged enough with other teachers. I think you can do this without having too much. Who are some teachers that you look to and look to for inspiration, or who are doing big things that probably deserve a shout out?
Oh, well, obviously you, and I listen to your podcast every time it comes out because I glean something from it every single time. You know, you may be talking something now about the college side of things or just overall, but how can I apply that? Dempsey, Josh Dempsey is one of my heroes. Leanne Kuhn, who's over at Wheeler, Wildcat, she's awesome. She's just on top of her game. There's a newer teacher over at Osborne. She's, oh my gosh, she does, Chelsea Fury is her name. Mm-hmm. She comes from the film, so to speak, industry. So I glean from her, and she's a newer teacher. She's constantly asking, but the fact that she's asking is awesome. I just love the different ideas that are coming. So those are just a few of them, but anybody at Camp T&I, I'm there to learn. I listen. I may, talk a lot and, share some things, but mostly I listen, and it's because everybody's got cool ideas, and it's just how can I apply that with where I'm at.
Gotcha. What is something you wish someone would have told you 11 years ago?
I know when I was subbing, I was able to go in, on time, essentially punch in, sign in, get my sub pass, and go and teach the things and walk out at 3:30. When you enter this as a full-time gig, it's much more. And thankfully, I love what I do, so I get to play every day. So usually it's my wife calling me up at 6:30, 7 o'clock going, so you coming home? And it's like, holy cow, that's right, and all our live streams that we do with the basketball games, or we get to do multi-camera shoots of the for their archival copy for the theater department. Gives my kids an opportunity to learn what a multi-camera shoot is like, and have somebody call the shots for that and learn how to prep and get going on it. I just love doing all that kind of stuff. So I get to play all day, every day. So I wish they would have told me, like, FYI, it may be, you get your summers off, which you don't, because I'm constantly learning, constantly going to seminars and conferences and Camp T&I, and looking forward to the SVG college thing coming up again in June, if we're around for that. Because I just learn, make connections, network, and learn. It's an all-year gig.
Yeah, it really is, and that's something that I've tried to encourage throughout the podcast is to go and see other programs and go and be where you're not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be at SVG.
Yeah,
we're just lowly. My first time at SVG, I had one of their vendors literally tell me, "Well, I have nothing that you can afford." I'm like, well, okay, well, if I can't afford it, I'm not going to buy it now. Yeah. He's like, well, you're just a high school teacher. And I'm like, okay, guy, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I'll leave.
Tells me all I need to know.
Yeah. But to go to those places where you're not technically supposed to be is really where you get the most. And that's kind of like that episode where, here at UGA, that thing we did for the election show, we weren't supposed to do that. There was none of the other TV stations, none of the real quote unquote TV stations in Atlanta did that many live shots.
Yeah, that's
we weren't
insane.
Supposed to do that. But the growth that came from that, and the growth that comes from going to those places where you're not supposed to be, or you're challenging yourself, is second to none.
Exactly. That kind of brings up a story of mine. You're talking about the election. I know we had talked a little bit before about, what's been the coolest thing that you've done. Outside of that lesson with the cards, the coolest thing that I've done is I had a student who was very interested in politics and going into reporting. I mean, this was her track. She was locked in. And I said, okay, it's an election. It was 2016. And she said, well, I want to do a show about how high school kids can actually participate. I said, well, how old? She goes, oh, I don't know. And I said, well, where would you find this information out? Because they can, as long as they meet you. So who's responsible for that? So she did some research. She came back and she goes, yeah. She goes, I don't know. And I'm like, what? She goes, it's the Secretary of State that heads up all the elections. I'm like, okay. So you want to do a segment on that? Call him up. I can't do that. I'm like, the heck we can't. Let's go into my office. Let's go. Look up the number online. She goes, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. We'll just put it on speakerphone. So we put it on speakerphone and dialed in, and lo and behold, Secretary of State then was Brian Kemp, and his administrative assistant answered the phone, and I said, hi, my name is Bill Phelps. I'm a video teacher over here at Harrison High School in Kennesaw, Georgia, and I have a student that wants to do a segment on this. Here she is. And so the student, like, introduce yourself, tell her who you are and what you want to do. And we ended up with taking a crew down, and we interviewed Secretary of State Brian Kemp for 45 minutes. So we sat outside his office with all the network news, and they call us, and we get to go in and produce that thing. And then on top of that, you did your 3-hour coverage. My student went ahead, and I contacted a school out in Seattle, Washington, and we actually had feeds going back and forth through ESC Network back at the time. Connected us through. So we were talking about what's on the ballot there, what's important, what's on the ballot down here in Southeast. So we tried to get truly cross. And so for 3 hours, we did the update. We had parents coming in after they voted and sit around and talk about what it was all about. We had high school students come in, and then we would take a hit from Seattle, and periodically they would take a hit from us, and it was all live streamed. So we didn't have 15 or 30, but as a high school.
Yeah, but that is another example of you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
You're not supposed, and I'm going to stay off a soapbox. The programs that do well do crazy things.
Yeah.
And the programs that do well have leadership who will go, yeah, why not? And we'll make that phone call. And your conversation about I see that a lot here in the students that are in our new show. They'll say, well, I can't do that. But then we have a volunteer show where they're getting like bang up, crazy, wild FBI interviews because they don't know to not call. They just are like, you know what? I got nothing to lose.
Yeah. What are you going to say? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Plant the flag and try.
It's not even like you have to pay a quarter to call them anymore.
Exactly.
You're out nothing but a minute.
Yep.
So no, that's a great story of you coaching that student and empowering them through that opportunity simply because you said yes.
And I'll be honest with you, now she's driven, so that was a little bit easier for her. There's a small little victory I just had yesterday. My second level kids are doing a 5 to 7 minute documentary. I've got a student who is got social anxiety. She has a very difficult time talking. So her entire first semester with me never said boo. Now I got her level 2, so now she's actually talking a little bit and getting kind of comfortable with the kids in the class and doing that. And so we're going over what she wants to do for her documentary. She wants to do it on recycling. And I said, okay, who are you interviewing? I'm going to talk to my mom because we're avid recyclers. I'm like, great, who's the second one? You got to have 2, a minimum. And she says, another student. I'm like, no. I said, where do you go to this? She goes, well, the recycling place down in Cobb County. I'm like, call them. I can't. I backed off. And I said, send an email. I said, what's the worst that happens? They say no. She goes, I can't do it. I have anxiety. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Send the email. You don't have to phone call. Send the email. Mm-hmm. She came in yesterday. She goes, I sent the email. I'm like, so? She goes, they wrote right back and said they would love to have me. They'll take me on a tour. I can get all the B-roll I need. I mean, I had to scrape her off the ceiling tiles. She was so high. I'm like, so proud of you. Just for sending that email, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one thing may have changed that child's life.
Yep.
And that is why we do. I mean, that is that's that hokey pokey moment where we go, that's what it's all about.
Yep.
And
yep.
And that's and you seeing that and knowing that is the victory for you, and probably keeps you in education for a little while.
I'll come back and teach Monday. Yep. Well, next Monday. Yeah.
I'll give you next week off. How about that? You did such a great job yesterday. Well, that is In complete transparency, we're both sitting here glassy-eyed.
Yeah. I'm a mush now. The older I get, the more of a mush I become. So, but that's all right.
Yeah, it's tough. So let's talk about three things that people don't know that you do. Let's get off the let's dry some eyes.
Well, holy cow. My life's kind of an open book, I think, anyway. There's not a whole lot to me. Everybody knows I teach. But what I do is I empower my students, I guess, more so than what I've been talking to other teachers and what they do, certainly more than what I was used to when I was in the academic side, teaching middle school. I empower my students, and I put them in positions where they can make the choices. Some are good, some are bad, but they have to learn that they have to do that. So many people think I'm just a teacher, so I get up, I set the rules, I set the boundaries, and everybody follows lockstep, and that's not the case. I get up, I present the material, and as I tell the kids, this is, my job is to get you college and career ready. So I'm going to treat this like a college course. My job is to present the material in as many different ways for you to learn. Your job is to learn it. Your job is to ask the questions. Your job is to ask for help. If you need it, your job is to learn that. That's not my job. That's your job. And so many people don't realize that the way I teach is completely different. And I've had kids who've come back who didn't want to take my course. They just got jammed into it because it's an elective. And they said, I learned more from your class than I did all my other ones.
I think that sentiment's echoed a lot more than people realize.
Yep.
In the video production classes, I really do think that one kid did it, but there's probably 15 more who wouldn't swallow their pride or whatever to come and actually say that.
Yeah. And good kids. I've got, everyone has their goofy kids, and I've got my goofy kids, and I'm like, guys, it's not that I don't like you.
Yeah.
That's not it. It's just you're making bad choices. So let's fix this, and then you'll be fine. I'll still talk DraftKings with you. I'll still talk fantasy football with you. It's not about that. We can compartmentalize that. You're still a good kid. Now it's just time to make some good choices.
Yeah. And the hardest thing that I found when I taught, and I still find it now, where I'm more of a coach than a teacher, is getting the kids to see the good in them. I've got one young lady now who is a rock star. Literally, she doesn't graduate till May and is already under contract.
Wow.
Like, they basically made her sign a contract that she would not talk to another news agency.
How cool is that?
She drives from Athens to her news agency every weekend to work.
Wow. That's
awesome. But they basically signed her in a contract. We have two of those. But she's the hardest on herself. Like, I'm like, honey, you did great. You're doing great stuff.
Yeah.
And she's in a different role when she works with me. She's not a journalist. She's more of a tech. Mm-hmm. Beats herself up. So I'm like, you're doing great. Like, we just did a show with 15 different segments, and we're switching it, and you're directing, and you're rocking it, killing it. How do you help kids see that? What are tips from Bill on how to help kids see that in themselves?
One of the things I try to do every day, my goal is to provide opportunities for my kids to stretch themselves out of their comfort zone. For example, that girl sending an email. For her, that's that. For another student, it's, hey, you're more technically inclined. What can you do in After Effects to jazz up your thing here? You know what I mean? So it's different ones again, but that all boils down to getting to know your students and what jazzes them, what gets them going. And even if they're not into video, what can you do with my class that would apply to what you're doing? And then when they do that, just pour on the praise.
Yeah.
Just pour on the praise and say, see, you didn't hurt. Look at that. You still have all your digits. There's no blood involved with this whole thing. And you did awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. The other thing I do, especially for the high school students, which may be a little bit out of the league for the college side, is I'll immediately send an email to the parents.
Isn't that great?
Just, hey, you know what? I'm proud of your kid. You should be too. They stepped out of their comfort zone. You're doing a great job. Great job.
There is nothing better than sending that email.
Yep.
The good kids, bad kids, whoever. Yep. There is nothing better that And one of the things that I used to do was I would do Student of the Month, mm-hmm. and I would have the kids nominate people.
Oh, there you go.
So there was a Google form, tell me who should be student of the month and tell me why.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is...
Anonymous?
It was completely anonymous. Yeah. And then, like, if a kid won it, they couldn't win it over and over.
Right.
But what I would do is take those responses and email those responses to the parents.
What a great idea.
And, and I would anytime I communicated with the parent, I always copied the kid.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yep.
There were kids who it turned them to me. Because I'll admit, I'm not easy. I'm not an easy. I have high expectations from the day you walk in to the day you walk out and beyond. And for a lot of kids, that's uncomfortable. But that turned so many kids in my career to, oh, Mr. White really does care.
He's on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, if your kids don't feel like you're on their side, you'll never get the most out of them.
Right.
So.
Right.
Well, is there anything else we should cover that we haven't?
Holy cow, we covered quite a bit there. I guess the only, whenever I talk to I'm the coordinator for all the Cobb County video teachers, and that was just done by default because I arrived late at a meeting one day, and because I was working with a kid and getting them set up. Yeah.
Professionalism tip: show up early to meetings.
Yeah, well, be in the right place at the right time.
There you go.
So that'll, you pay the price. So one of the things I constantly tell my teachers is like, stretch it, let the kids play. That's probably the biggest thing. If you can let the kids play, they'll shock you. They'll shock themselves. But more importantly, my kids are teaching me more about the TriCaster than I ever had time to learn. And it's cool. And it all goes into their reel. All this problem-solving stuff and the stuff they overcame, that's now in there. I always have that's a lesson that I offer in my first part of the semester is write a paragraph about something that you overcame last semester. Because when they go to a job interview, when they go to a college interview, it's tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you handle? Tell me about a time when.
Yep.
And God knows in the broadcast video production world, there's a million times when, and that's just in one period.
Yep.
So you're constantly running across those things. So that's probably my most important thing. I'm just an old man doing this thing. And as I tell my students, there's some like the producers and directors and they're like, oh, what about this? And this went wrong. And this, I'm like, relax. Because you know what the real lesson is this, the 5 R's. That's the real lesson. This is just my sandbox to give you guys an opportunity to learn something and learn those types of things, how to communicate and how to problem solve. You do those things, you're going to be gold to anybody who hires you in any field.
Yeah, teaching video production is just an adulting class.
Yep.
It's really all it is.
That's all it is.
Timelines, deadlines, working as a group, reading, writing, the basics.
Yep.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for making the trip out and hanging out for a little bit. We're going to go eat some lunch here in just a minute, but I really appreciate you coming and coming off the road for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, do we have to do a segment about this? I think that was our Camp T&I theme, was that whenever we would go out and have to do a segment, we always picked a restaurant.
There we go. Yeah, we
could food.
We could probably figure something out. I think my cafeteria is a little different than yours.
Probably.
Well, thank you again,
All right,
Bill, for your time, and thank you so much for downloading this episode. And hey, go out this weekend, or actually take this week off. It's Thanksgiving week.
Yep.
I'll get this up, in the next day or so. It's Saturday morning.
Yeah.
But I'll have it out maybe later tonight. But go out and enjoy your family, enjoy Thanksgiving, and when you get back in the classroom, go out and make some awesome.
Definitely.
Teaching to the test pattern.